Welcome to Inaudible. I'm your host, Jeremy Weiland, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nithin Reddy. On this podcast, we discuss the weird, beautiful channeled messages found in the long tradition of contact with the Confederation of planets in service to the one infinite creator. These messages articulate a philosophy of spiritual evolution, popularly known as the Law of One. Many of these messages are available to listen to on our sister podcast, Living Love and Light, available on all platforms. We seek to provide analysis and commentary on this philosophy described in these messages, identifying the common themes and grappling with the application of this information to our human lives. However, we are not counselors, gurus, or experts of any kind. So please evaluate our words in light of our shortcomings and use your own best judgment. Thanks for listening. And I am very happy to introduce for the first time to the podcast, Jon Firman. Jon does a fantastic YouTube channel called Insight 369. Do I have that right, Jon?
Inspire 369.
Inspire 369. Dang it. All right, cool. Let's start over. No, just kidding. No, I was weirded out because I got momentarily distracted because the rain just started dumping where I am as soon as we started recording. And I was like, "It's the AC on?" Because that's really loud. But no, that's yeah, good. So, Jon, how are you doing?
Good. Yeah, really good.
Fantastic. Nithin, how's it going, buddy?
Life's good.
Cool. Well, thanks both of you for joining me. I don't think the last time we did a 3-person podcast was interviewing Claire D'Artez, me and Ryan on the Archetypal Mind. So I'm hoping that this will be slightly less heady, but we'll see. The topic today is on magic, ritual magic, ceremonial magic, what magic is all about and how it fits into the Law of One philosophy and the seeker's path. Is there anything you want to elaborate on that, Nithin?
No, I was just going to let everyone know that I'm not well-versed in the topic of magic. So for today, I'm going to be taking more of an interviewer style and asking you two, the experts on the subject, some questions. In terms of kind of like what we're going to talk about today, first, we're going to go over what our definition of magic is. Second, as a seeker, why do we care about magic? Third, maybe the common types of magic, at least discussed in some of the frameworks or the raw material, Confederation material. Then talk about maybe what is not magic, right? We'll go into some Confederation quotes. We'll go into some personal experiences and individual topics, and then we'll finish with some concluding thoughts and takeaways. So let's just dive right in. First, for the panel, the first question is what is your definition of magic? Well, Jon, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely.
Sure. So I define magic as really the harnessing and manipulation of energy, but also the development of the personal will. That's really what the purpose of magic is, in my opinion. It is the Western tradition of what in the East they call Tantra, yoga, and systems like that, right? In the West, we have magic, which is our yoga, right? It's our way of building out our energy system. It's our way of strengthening our aura, right? In Buddhism, meditation is really the focus, and that's more in the mental sphere. In magic and in the tantric traditions in the East, it's really about building out the energy system and the energy body. And so that's what I believe magic is all about.
Wonderful. I love how you brought Tantra into this, because as I said, I don't know much about the subject, but I'm a little bit familiar with that. So awesome. Jeremy, what's your kind of understanding of magic?
Well, I have always been influenced by those of Ra's definition. And like, they don't really have a set definition. They confirm Don's question of the definition that W.E. Butler, I believe, offers in one of his books, which is the ability to create changes in consciousness at will. So in conscious, now that's kind of a sweeping definition, because consciousness in our philosophy is everything. So it's like the ability to change everything, right? But I think it's interesting to locate it in consciousness because it shows what level of reality is being worked with when we talk about magic. It's not, a lot of people dismiss magic because they think it's about casting spells or doing rituals that like make things in phenomenal reality happen. But I tend to think of that more as, I think that's a little bit petty of a way to approach it, because the point is that magicians are working with deep concepts that underlie our reality. And that, it's kind of a deeper version of what like a magician that's commonly and popularly known, like, somebody like making the Empire State Building disappear or something like that, or making a card disappear. What they're doing is they're changing your perception. They're manipulating your perception. And at the end of the day, if your perception is how you perceive reality, if it's how you sort of like put ideas together in your experience, then that very much is magic. And by the same token, if we can imbue our seeking process through life with more meaning, and we can participate in its deeper evolutionary task in a way that gives us a sense of agency, then I think we're using that same kind of power that Jon mentioned. And so what I will be talking about, and I'll be trying to take things in the direction of where the law of one helps us guide this power. Because I think every single person listening to this podcast, every single person that exists has this latent power in them. Just like every single person has, like, for the most part, a muscular system with which they can effect changes on reality, effect changes on the material world. The question is have you honed that or not? And so we're talking about in what ways is it useful and positively polarized, let's say, to hone that.
So as a seeker, why might it be important for me to consciously understand and work with the concept of magic? Because it sounds like that a lot of what we do, maybe as seekers, works with it without conscious knowledge, right? So why do I want to have a better conscious understanding of this concept, Jeremy?
You may not, right?
Okay.
Like it may be that, the magic that you normally perceive in the world. I mean, most of us don't think about how our cell phones work, how electricity works, we can give ourselves explanations. We can engage in experiments, but very few of us build this technology from the ground up. It is in a way a kind of magic in the sense that it affects changes in the reality that we perceive. And it does it in this orderly way, right? It does it in this way that where we can reproduce phenomena consistently from moment to moment to moment. It's funny because in the Renaissance era, when you had this tradition of Hermeticism and magic going on then, the way that they thought about magic was was very, very similar to the way that the scientists like Galileo and Newton thought about the scientific method. It was this way of ordering their consciousness, their perception, their reality. The difference between the scientists and the magicians was the magicians want to apply an orderly, structured way of understanding the nature within. And the scientists wanted an orderly, structured way of approaching the nature without, so the material world. And the church was opposed to them for exactly the same reasons. There was no distinction between these two. They were subverting the authority of the church to tell people how things were. And instead, people were learning how to find out for themselves. Now, when you don't have an authority laying this down for you, you have to have some reliable means to to figure out the principles behind things. And that involves experimentation, careful documentation. And that's what both parties did. I want to say that, like, to the extent that we don't engage in our lives like that, we're probably not doing magic, but there's always some way in which we're learning and reacting to the feedback mechanism of perception and experience.
And Jon, what are your thoughts on maybe why a seeker can benefit from the conscious understanding and use of magic?
Yeah, I think I agree with Jeremy, and I'd also add that one of the things that magic does is the strengthening of the will, right? And when I say that, it's not they're in a tradition called Thelema, which Aleister Crowley started. It's more of a religion now, but it was essentially the saying is do what thou will is the whole of the law, right? And a lot of people misinterpret that as saying, oh, just do whatever you want, right? So, but it's actually means aligning your will with the will of the one infinite creator, right? So it's like you're making your will in this world, what you're here to do, the gifts you're here to spread, right? Is having the courage to do that while also aligning, with the will of the one, right? So we're all here. We all have gifts. Some of us have gifts, in this area. Some of us are stronger in this area. And if you don't discover that, right, or if you understand those gifts but you don't use them effectively, you're essentially wasting those gifts. And so that's really what he was talking about is strengthening your will to affect change in this world by developing yourself, in that capacity. So as seekers, I think it's really important for us to do that, right? So we're as wanderers, right? We all have a purpose, in this world, right? And so magic affords us the ability to kind of understand ourselves better, to strengthen our will, right, and our ability to kind of do what we set out to do in this world. The other side of that, I guess, in addition to that, is the protection it affords. And so, from my personal experience, when I was first kind of waking up, in my early 20s, I was getting into yoga a lot, and so and in yoga, at least in the way it's taught in the West, is you do a lot of breath work, you do a lot of these grounding exercises, but you don't learn a lot about protecting yourself. And what I mean by that is strengthening the aura so that you're not taking on other people's energy, or you're not having negative astral parasites and stuff kind of attack you essentially. And so it sounds a little crazy to say all that, but in magic, the first thing you learn is the banishing ritual of Lesser Pentagram. And the reason why you do that is because when you're doing this type of work, you tend to light up in the astral realm, and it attracts, certain entities towards you, and some of them have, not good intentions. And so when I was younger, that's what was happening to me. And so I would have, experiences where, I would kind of, have sleep paralysis, and kind of see shadow, people in your sleep kind of thing. And very scary experiences when you're first kind of waking up and you don't really have a context for what's happening. And so it kind of scared me to the point where I kind of stopped doing any kind of work, energetically, right, for a long time. And then I read the Law of One, and I discovered the Golden Dawn, which is the magic that they were practicing in the material, and that kind of opened my eyes to kind of a new system, a way of kind of of developing that level of protection, which is needed, I think, for seekers who are waking up and kind of and who are, it's kind of hard to describe, but essentially, if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, and you are meditating a lot, and you're doing breathing exercises and things like this, you can open yourself up energetically to forces that you necessarily wouldn't want to open yourselves up to, if that makes a lot of sense. And so that's kind of where magic, I think, is very important to practice, is like as a way to protect yourself and create like a shell that you can kind of work with.
So, John, to follow up on your discussion of protection, are there categories of magic that you find useful to like kind of think and categorize? So, for example, you mentioned protection, you mentioned tantric practices. Are there other kind of areas that you feel like it's useful to delineate? There's a certain type of magic here. Just different ways to think about these different types of magic. What categories would you say are out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's planetary magic, which is really about affecting. So I guess yeah. There's different grades and different levels, right? You start out, at least in Western tradition, you start out learning elemental magic, which is really about learning to work with fire, learning to work with earth, learning to work with air, and so forth. And that really is when you're doing that kind of work, it's really about you'll find that each of these elements correspond to different areas in your personal life, right? So, like, for example, if you're working with the element of earth, right, and you're doing the invoking ritual of the Lesser Pentagram, but you're doing it for earth, you will find that for example, if you're overweight, you'll suddenly have a desire to kind of lose weight, right? It's like getting your life in order, if that makes sense. But in like on the elemental plane, on the earth level, when you're doing planetary magic, you're invoking planetary energies, which are higher order levels of consciousness, and that deals more with affecting. Essentially, it's a lot quicker in terms of what it manifests, right? There's less work involved on your side. So like if you invoke Jupiter, right? Jupiter is known as like good fortune. It's if you're trying to like invoke money into your life or prosperity, right? You would invoke Jupiter. You would work with the Jupiter energy, and if you do that, you would tend to get things like a raise at your job, or you would find money like on the street or something like that, if that energy is willing to work with you in that sense. The problem is if you don't do the elemental stuff, right, the base level stuff, before you do the higher level stuff, first off, you're going to make unwise decisions. You're going to basically want to get rich quick, right? And so you're going to invoke Jupiter when you're not ready to do that. And so Jupiter will give you prosperity potentially, but with a terrible cost, right? It'll be like, okay, well, I'll win the lottery or something like that, but it'll be, but then something bad will happen to me because I need to learn that lesson that I didn't learn when I worked on those elemental grades, if that makes sense. So that's one example of like kind of like the different levels of types of magic, and then but then you also have like obviously black magic, which is a little bit different in that sense, and other magic which works more with I'm trying to think. I'm about to have to cut this part. I guess I can just leave it at that. But
I think we're going to have an opportunity to get way into the negative side of this, because it's something that's like directly dealt with in the Law of One. But one thing that I'd like to point out is that what John, what you're talking about may strike people as pretty out there, right? Like you've just laid out a framework for your understanding and honestly a tradition of understanding what at the end of the day are deeper energies, deeper patterns of energy that we have determined have these kind of qualities that we are able to assign symbols, labels, reference to. It's important to understand that there are other systems, right? Like than the ones that than the ones that I know, that also work with the same energies, or maybe even different energies, different aspects of the energies. The problem is that when we're talking about energy, we're talking about something that is so abstract and undifferentiated that it's unworkable. It's just energy. So we introduce distinctions and separations into these energies, and we find these different qualities. And then what I think is really interesting about ceremonial ritual magic is that we find ways to consistently and persistently invoke aspects of what at the end of the day is all one. We're invoking these and bringing and mobilizing these aspects. The same way that the archetypal mind is a kind of a way in which we've taken a cookie cutter to something rich and unified. And we've said, well, this is this way of slicing and dicing it up, or this way of dipping in and pulling parts out. It doesn't make it less a piece of a whole. It just means that by looking at it as a piece, by introducing, in other words, this kind of focus or separation, we then are able to do what another thing that Ra says in a very general and undifferentiated way, work, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's a reason why they just use the word work when they're talking about a lot of spiritual invocation and execution of power. It's because they want to keep it general, and probably they want to elide any pigeonholing of it into one polarity or another as a just to begin with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that.
And I think it's really good that this is why I wanted to bring you on, because you have these specific ways of approaching things. I think probably what I'll be doing is like generalizing a lot and like trying to like trace things back to like the more general way that the law of one looks at things.
Yeah.
It's a good contrast to have both of you from such unique perspectives. So in terms of quotes from Confederation philosophy, were there any that really spoke to you, Jeremy, on the subject of magic?
Oh yeah. There were several points that Jon was talking about in the specific Western tradition that I wanted to trace back to Ra's, extraplanetary point of view. And I think the place to start is will, because I think this is a very, very important element of the way in which magic is done. In session 79, question 32, those of Ra say, as you understand, if we may use this misnomer, magic, the magical potential in third and fourth density was before, they're talking about before the veil, right? So a third density in, quote unquote, past creations. The magical potential was then far greater than after the change. However, there was far less desire or will to use this potential. So although we probably have some like vague memory of past creations in which the world was magical. And sometimes I think fantasy is like a reaching back to this more magical time when the potentials of creation were more at hand, right? And more ready to be invoked. But we didn't have the desire to use them, and marshaling that will is the first real step towards acting, whether it's in the phenomenal world that we all recognize, whether it's in the deeper world out of which that phenomenal world is constructed. Any thoughts on that, Jon?
No, absolutely. That's actually brilliant. I think that is one of the goals of magic. It's like it's to unveil, right? It's to have your own personal apocalypse, right? It's like go through that unveiling, and one of the things that's really important to remember is that it's through faith, right? That you truly can kind of cross the abyss, so to speak, and tap into that potential. I think that's really interesting. When they talk about intelligent infinity and intelligent energy, right? And magic is the utilization of the energy that we speak of in magic. I mean, that is intelligent energy, and tapping intelligent infinity, allows one to bring forth that intelligent energy into the world, and the process of developing yourself as a seeker on the positive path, right, is to have that foundation and that balance so that you can use it wisely and for service to others versus the negative path, which is the opposite. So yeah,
I have a great quote excerpt here that addresses just this. I'm so glad you brought up faith, because I think this is where we start to get into where polarity fits into all of this, right? How polarity is kind of this like galvanizing charge that takes a normal human, animal, or third density experience and really sort of like, puts a high voltage through it. On June 14th, 1992, Kuo was addressing this, and they said, as a positively polarized person living a life in faith, one is prone to feel safe in the arms of the good, the true, and the beautiful. However, the entity upon the negative path feels that there is no safety, feels that there is no haven, feels that it and only it shall be the one to be counted upon, relied upon. Therefore, this entity wishes to build personal power with a greater initial reason and impetus for building a magical personality. Furthermore, this magical personality is simpler to build than the positively oriented magical personality. The negative entity need only attempt to, inaudible, something to the self, probably accrue. The negative entity need only attempt to accrue to the self all personal power of any kind whatsoever, without the need for discrimination or judgment. And just to jump in, this is what you were talking about, this ability to sort of like understand how you're grounded in this, or to sort of just accept anything, and then you're sort of like swayed by whatever forces you're sort of transmitting through yourself. They continue, the positively polarized entity instead is moving through processes of balancing the seemingly opposite of all things, to ascertain the most careful balance of truth, of beauty, of goodness. For to the positively oriented entity, it is clear that the illusion has the appearance of a bias towards negative events and circumstances. And Ra talks about this too, that, in third density, everything seems negative. But that's because most of us are in the sinkhole of indifference or polarizing positively, and we're all in kind of a quiet horror, I think they call it, about what goes on in the world. To continue, in order to clarify right action and the positive use of power, careful balancing of all stimulus needs must be done. Thus, each of you has the seemingly more difficult task in living a life. Thus, each of you has the seemingly more difficult task in living a chosen life of faith, for both paths are given by the one infinite Creator. Although the Creator offers suggestions implicit in experience that the positive path of serving others is preferable and more to be desired, the negative path beckons, and it too is powerful. I would say it's inaudible, but I think powerful. As this instrument would say, godly in that there is no energy but that of the one infinite Creator. Further, the inaudible of your experience in third density offers simpler beginnings to a metaphysical base of power for those which choose negativity. What is not obvious is that the negative path becomes more and more difficult, until at last it is a road impossible to be walked, whereas the positive path is eternal. And I think that last part is really interesting. We know that those of Ra have often said that the negative path, or the path of that which is not, as it is traversed through the evolution of higher densities, becomes more and more difficult. But I never heard it articulated so well why it's so alluring in this density as a starting point. And it makes sense that if everybody kind of perceives our world as kind of having a negative tinge to begin with, one would want to act in this world, and therefore start with the accrual of power as a way to kind of like, protect oneself from the world, and then control the world as an act, sometimes of goodwill, seemingly, right? You want to help, and then you start to take on more and more power so you can help. And by the time you know it, you're like going down the path of Anakin Skywalker, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a question of like, how do you use power, right? So, in this world we're veiled, and the default position is limitation. You know what I mean? We're seemingly limited. And I think that power comes from that feeling of limitation, of like wanting to be secure, of wanting, resources, etc. And when you're on the positive path, right? I mean, we even the positive and negative path have those needs, right? We all need resources. We all need things. We all need, support. And it's just that, those on the positive path, right, utilize power in term, with a lot more wisdom, right, and a lot more of an open heart. And it's learning how to do that, I think, is a big challenge, and particularly when you're dealing with magic, because when you work on magic, you do become more powerful, right? In terms of like your own personal will, right? It gets strengthened, and so therefore you're able to act more effectively in the world. You get clearer thinking. You get, all these benefits. It's very easy to see how tempting it could be to use that to gain something, right? Gain resources, to gain a job, or money, or to will something into existence that you want, right? And admittedly, as I've developed this, it's like, there are instances where I could see both in myself. It's like I could see, utilizing this, a magic for personal gain. I was like, well, I could do that if I wanted, but it's like, I'm like, it's like I feel like, not shame, but I just feel like in my head, I'm like, okay, well, obviously we're dual beings who have both good and bad in us, right? And so it's that choice to say, okay, I understand where this can go, but I need to, make sure that this is working for the whole, right? Working for everyone, and maximizing the free will of all. And I think that's an important lesson that we're learning in third density is that utilization of power, which I find really interesting.
Absolutely. The way that I've heard it discussed by Carla somewhere was that, and I think they even have this in some of the rituals that they use to set up for the raw contact, was that one seeks in order to serve. And there's a raw quote about this, session 71, question 16. They say, it is possible for what you term white magic to be worked for the purpose of altering only the self or the place of working. This is done in the knowledge that to aid the self in polarization towards love and light is to aid the planetary vibration. And it's important to recognize that this faith comes back into play with that, like you said, John, because what you're doing is you're trying to bring power and faith and will to the places where the creator sees it needed, and that you are not the big planner deciding how things should be. You are trying to be an instrument for the creator's will, and that requires an emptying out of self and an emptying out of the self's designs to make this possible. And it also, there's another excerpt I had that talked about how there's a lot of balancing of catalysts that's necessary in order for you to be able to be this balanced and therefore unbiased, to the extent that you can be, unbiased instrument for this transmission of love and light into the creation where the creator would have it be. But I can't find it right now.
So I have a question for you, Jeremy, and John, based on that last quote. So, just to reiterate what you just read, it is possible for what you term white magic to be worked for the purpose of altering only the self or the place of working. This is done in the knowledge that to aid the self in polarization towards love and light is to aid the planetary vibration. So how exactly does aiding the self in polarization towards love and light aid the planetary vibration? Is it just is it something like you're changing a number there in the planetary vibration, or does it have is it more like the butterfly effect where you change yourself and then something unexpectedly might change on the other side of the world? Like, what sort of change are we talking about?
Yeah, see, here's the thing. I don't know exactly how all of this works. I mean, to the same extent, a scientist doesn't know exactly how their theories work. Like you can come up with narratives that give you the ability to reliably reproduce, to reliably produce causes and thereby get effects. But like, how does an atom work? Well, okay, well, how do the subatomic particles work? I mean, you can always trace the mystery of causality down further and further until you're left with no explanation at all. And I think it's similar in so many aspects of our lives. I don't know exactly how it works. I can give you an idea of what I use as a stand-in for my lack of understanding. What Ra calls the keys of unknowing, right? That's what the positive polarity is pursuing, the keys of unknowing. And it is the idea that the Earth is a kind of focal point for this experience we are all having collectively on this planet. When we ground this energy that's in the cosmos into this planet through our will and desire, we have given it this very basic charge that then allows the Earth as a whole to distribute it as it will. The same way that I take in food. I don't think about, well, hey, you got to send a certain amount of the calories to the heart. You got to send a certain amount of calories to the brain. Like it figures it out, and I don't worry about it. I trust that this organism, this creation of intelligence is going to work this out in a way that I don't have to monitor and direct.
So let me rephrase maybe the same question for Jon. So when you're trying to employ white magic to aid in the polarization of the self towards love and light, we've talked about in many different sessions how there's feedback available as to whether you're polarizing right towards the service to others. There are whether you're naturally organically responding to catalytic situations that maybe bothered you in the past with more love, right? So there are ways to kind of get feedback as to whether the self is being polarized towards love and light. But is there going to be feedback to know that your magical working is in addition also affecting the planetary vibration? How do I know that what I'm doing, is there a way to find out whether I'm affecting the planet?
Yeah. First, I let's say, Jeremy, that was beautifully said. I think that's exactly my position too. Like there's no way I think to officially know, right? The Law of One transcripts do kind of give some clues as to how this works. And one of the things that I've read and understand myself is that, doing this work of opening up to intelligent infinity, right? And kind of in working with magic, grounding that divine energy into this planet is that it affects the collective unconscious of the planet. And it's almost like you're planting a seed in the collective unconscious that can then bubble up into wherever else. So like, for example, I like to think of it as like how did certain similarities between different cultures coexist at the same time, right? It's like they obviously got it from from the same source. In that case, it's like it was an archetype, right? Or it was an idea that was planted within the collective unconscious. And so when you're doing this work, I do believe that it transfers to everyone in that sense.
Like a 100th monkey effect kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. It's a subtle thing, right? You're not going to know, especially if you're deeply unconscious, you're not going to know. But I believe that, doing the work of awakening, doing the work of opening the heart, and doing the work of grounding this, bringing forth the divine energy through you and clearing the energy centers, that work does have an effect on the entire planet, in the sense that it helps in some way. It helps other people from across the world, understand this information a little bit too. Now there is the other side of that too, in that, it is the work of bringing this out into the world in the form of what we're doing, in the form of what the law, Ella Research and other organizations, where they're publishing transcripts, they're publishing these things, people are talking about it, right? It's getting into the conscious minds of everyone. That is the other side of that too. So it's teaching, it's speaking openly about these concepts, and that also has a great effect on others as well. So when you start doing magical work, you start receiving information, right? You start receiving insights into how you should be kind of working, right? And that kind of goes with the idea of like, the strengthening of the will, right? It's like, the will, you become guided by your true will, right? By the higher self, by by the one infinite creator, in terms of where you should be, how you should be, what you should be communicating, what work you should be doing, right? And that comes after you work on yourself. You've developed that foundation. You clear out the lower energy centers. You become balanced to a great degree. Then you can start working in this world in terms of bringing that seed, right? Those seeds of knowledge, and kind of spreading that out. And I think that's where a lot of this can be transmitted, really effectively.
I'm glad that you brought up the energy centers, because I think that there are a lot of, I don't want to enumerate them all, but there were several points in the Law of One, in the Raw Contact, where they talked about magic being synonymous in many cases with energy transfers of different kinds.
Wait. So
go ahead.
Are we saying then, right now, this discussion is a magical working of some sort?
Sure.
Jeremy.
Oh, yeah.
No, John's got it. Yeah, but it's not very focused,
right.
You would do in a magical working. In the same way that every day you wake up is like a graduation, but it's different than graduating from high school, putting on the robe, going through the ceremony, right? The interesting thing about third density consciousness, and one of the things that really separates it from second density, is this self-awareness that gives us the ability to make distinctions that we then charge with meaning and significance. We can put on certain ceremonial garments. We can have holidays that have significance. I mean, we can have weekends that have significance. I'm enjoying that right now. These are things that we create, but they start to accrue through the collective recognition and honoring power, and it gives structure to our personal and shared experience. There are plenty of people. I mean, Robert Anton Wilson was one of the thinkers that really got me into thinking about the power of ritual magic. But he approached it mostly as kind of a psychological technology. There's neurolinguistic programming and magic have a lot in common, in the sense that they are trying to use the plasticity of the brain and the fluidity of the mind to channel energy in these more intense ways than, say, we are partaking in this conversation right now. That does not mean that there's nothing magical to what we're doing right now. It's just that, in the same way that the graduation ceremony for high school is a particular kind of transition period that we all go through, in smaller and smaller, less and less concentrated ways throughout our entire life, and even moment by moment. It's the same way with magic. So it's more of a spectrum, and it's less of a well, this is this and that is that.
So do either of you have any personal experiences with magic you'd like to share?
Sure. Yeah. It's, in terms of how it's affected my life or stuff like that, or are you looking more specifically for seeing angels or something like that? I mean, I guess,
that all sounds juicy.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, in terms of, I guess the biggest experience for me, right, was just like I said, when I first started working in consciousness work, waking up and stuff, and I started with yoga and meditation, and I would do kind of foolish things, in my opinion, which is trying to open up the third eye before I even had the understanding of what the lower energy centers were, and just very foolish things like that. And so, I had some very interesting experiences, out of body experiences and things like that, astral projection and stuff. And that was, again, I started getting okay, well, now I'm starting to attract, negative beings and stuff like that. So I would regularly kind of like, as I'm trying to fall asleep, be like overcome with fear, right? I would see, black orbs and things, just like obviously I would wake up drained, right? Drained of energy because it was like something was there, like sucking my energy away, And not only that, but the experience in the world, right? You're kind of like, like I think it's funny. It's like funny when people say like, oh, like, it's like I'm having a bad day, right? It's like that concept is like you're basically letting the world affect your mental state, right? And it's like you're out of control. And so that was the first thing that was kind of interesting when I started doing the banishing ritual, the lesser pentagram, is like, first off, the draining feeling I got when I woke up went away. The negative beings, that were, draining the energy off me were gone. That was the first thing. The next thing I noticed was that, my life started getting more in order, right? I started to have more control. I started to have more of a understanding of how I was affecting things and versus letting things affect me, right? And that was like the most noticeable thing that was like, okay, this is real, right? This actually was happening. But it was interesting because I didn't understand when you're doing the banishing ritual, you're drawing pentagrams and you're saying these words, these Hebrew words, and I don't know Hebrew, and I didn't really understand what they meant, but yet it was still working. You know what I mean? And that was very interesting. And I think in our call last weekend with Stephen Timon, he was speaking about symbols and language and, and how this works. And these magical practices in the West have a very long tradition, and it's almost like the symbols themselves are typal. You know what I mean? And they just work, right? Without having to need to really understand, what exactly they mean when you're starting out. Eventually, you do learn and you understand, like, okay, this upward means this, and this word means that, and that's very important. But it's also important just to start working on it and doing it, because then you'll gain an understanding of yourself.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that you put your finger on something that's very important in the law of one tradition of thinking and working with magic, which is that it's very, very similar in a lot of ways. It's kind of like a more powerful way of balancing your catalyst generally. In session 94, question 20, those of Ra say, the nature of experience is such that the attention shall be given constantly varieties of experience. Those that are presumed to be negative or interpreted as negative may seem in abundance. It is a great challenge to take catalyst and devise the magical positive experience. That which is magical in the negative experience is much longer coming, shall we say, in the third density. And I think that's really good, because you're not, what you were describing there, you didn't necessarily, in my opinion, need specific rituals handed down from time immemorial to work with that. But what it did was it gave you like a handle to hold on to, so that you could you could concentrate more and direct your consciousness and will towards the ends that you want. I see you nodding, so presumably you agree.
No, for sure. No, I that's, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the goals of Western magic is really this idea of starting with the basics and kind of building up towards these higher systems, and higher understanding, with the goal of developing the energy system, developing the will, right? And like I said, when I was younger, I was sensitive to this stuff, so I was just jumping right in, like let's open a third eye, let's go right to psychic, abilities, let's do that, and that's like a very bad idea. I'm very grateful that nothing really bad happened, but it can, you can go, there's stories of people going insane and stuff like that. So
absolutely,
anyway, yeah. So having that foundation is really important. But in the West, we have that. In the East, like I said, in the East they have that too, right? It's with working with the guru. It's doing the basic yoga practices and things like that. In the West, we don't really have that, except in magic, which is really about that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I also wanted to point out, Nithin, that at the generalized level that we're talking about magic, I would argue, in the same way that I had the example of high school graduation. You deal with a magical system every single working day as a lawyer. What is court?
Yeah.
But a ritual ceremonial system in which the power of the state is directed through consistent rules.
I plead the fifth. No comment.
Well, you can't plead the fifth when you're working with white magic, but it works in your case. I think that it's my experiences with magic are much more limited because I think that in order to work with it in a way that doesn't like blow yourself up, there's a certain level of maturity in life that you have to have in the first place. And it's hard to know where to direct these powerful energies towards anything but like getting a new car or getting a girlfriend or something like that, unless you have sort of like had a deeper seeking within yourself. I think my first real experience of magic was in the visualization techniques that we learned to do channeling. And then once I was not doing channeling at the LL Research House, which after all has a great energy and decades of protection, Jim's doing the banishing ritual every day there. So that energy accrues, and it's a great place to learn channeling because you do get sort of like a little bit of latent protection, even if your teachers aren't paying attention at the moment. Like it's just a great place to be. And you get to figure out what is the new energy coming in and what your energy is. So you can kind of see the distinction, right? And you kind of feel these things out. But once I didn't have that available to me anymore, I had to start doing clearing of spaces on my own at intensives and in my house when we do channeling sessions with the Richmond Meditation Circle. And so we have one scheduled for tomorrow that both of you gentlemen will be helping me with. And in order to prepare, I've been very, very rigorous about doing the banishing ritual in my living room all week. And what I have noticed is that like you start out by doing it's like following a recipe, right? And you're just like, I am a big fan of recipes and cooking because what I'm seeking to do is to get out of the way all of the different choices that are available to me, all the ingredients that would be possible, all the variations that I could make, a goulash out of or something like that. I want to do it the right way first and just buy the book. And then once you feel like you have that, then I start putting my spin on things, right? And I can start seeing what I like and what I don't like. And that was very much how the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram worked for me. I really had a hard time feeling like I was investing it with something that was mine at the beginning. I watched this video by a practitioner on YouTube after going through a bunch of them and being like, no. This guy seemed to have it down because he talked about the visualizations that he suggested were important in this ritual. And then it stopped becoming this kind of like, kata that I was doing, where I was just like walking around and tracing images. He started talking about what I was supposed to be feeling, how I was supposed to be like imagining myself. And that just kind of unlocked things because then I had a way of putting significance into it that, I did feel that there was significance, but it was somebody else's significance that had been handed down. And that's great. Those of Kuo say that one of the reasons why these rituals that you don't develop yourself, but that others pass down through a tradition are so valuable is that there are discarnate entities who work to cooperate with these energies, either because they did them in past lives or because the kind of wake that they leave over history is attractive to them. So I remember like when I first realized that the moment when you start the ritual and you're imagining yourself standing there before you've said a word is a hugely pregnant opportunity for emplacing yourself, situating your consciousness and your desire to do a polarized act. And so in that video, I'll share it in the notes. He suggests that you imagine yourself getting larger, and suddenly you're standing on top of the planet's small, and your feet are like, huge on the planet, and your head is stretching up to the very center of the universe, right? You're seeing the galaxies. None of this visualization matters except to the extent that it invokes a feeling of reverence, right? And a feeling of awe, and a sense that you're working with deep and cosmic forces, because you're working with deep and cosmic forces every day of your life. You're just giving it attention now because you want to do a specialized, concentrated working. You want to marshal that will and desire for a particular purpose. In my case, it's the purpose to serve. And so when I do that first ate, where you're like tracing down to your forehead, to your sixth chakra, like that has meaning to me that it didn't have before. And then when I'm visualizing the archangels, that has meaning that it didn't have before. But it was meaning that I had to discover. It wasn't like I just sat down and wrote it out. And I was like, well, this is what I'm going to do here. And this is how I'm going to think about it here. It was practice over time. And that's what I'm hoping will be the future of my ritual magic practice, because I'd like to learn other rituals to do. But I recognize that it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? Like you have to it's a partner in your own self-discovery. Just like meditation is a kind of thing that you do, but it gets richer and more meaningful as you do it. And you start to understand things that you can't articulate verbally or put into easy concepts that others can understand.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's really well put. It is the idea of it's not following a playbook necessarily, but it's also like learning what works for you. And I think that's really important. There is a concept of the contact with the holy guardian angel in Thelema, which is the goal of it. It's like to contact your higher self, essentially. Yeah. So, and to get downloads of information, and you can kind of, and once you do that, in that practice, at least, it's where you develop your own rituals, your own understandings, your own things. And so all that stuff you learned was good framework, but now you're kind of being more creative in your understanding that this symbolism works for you versus that. And so, this is why I like your videos so much, because I feel like you are really lateral in thinking about how to find connections between those wisdoms that we've been handed down, and then trying to feel out those things. And you can do it in this really visually compelling way. I just really like that. Like who cares if we have a quibble about some law of one concept on the periphery when we're finding these beautiful ways to express things in this fresh way that comes from the heart. It's just so awesome to observe, and it makes, I don't ever want the raw material or the law of one to become some sort of dogma or theology. You know what I mean? Like we should be able to think creatively about these things. Yeah, thank you, and absolutely, I agree. I think it's there. I've seen some calls on the Reddit forum for well, we should have a church, or it should be a thing, and I'm like, that's not the point. It's like this isn't. It's not there is no system of beliefs, right? This is all just it's more of a philosophy. It's a way of thinking.
I just want to say to those people, why do you not like fun? Why do you not
right.
like genuine seeking? Why does it have to be put in a box and then placed on a shelf? It's safe. It can never do anything while it's on that shelf. You know what I mean?
Right.
That might be a good way to bring in this February 12th, 2006 quote that I find to be a really good sort of summary that Kuo gave about what's involved in doing magic. So they say, what is it to create changes in your consciousness by an act of will? There are three basic factors weighing on this matter. The first is yourself as an actor and a chooser, right? So this is kind of what Steve was talking about last week, the role of the significator, that which goes and finds those things that appeal to it. Second, they continue, is your will. Its recognition as a factor, and its discipline by your daily work. In other words, this is not about just like going through the motions one time and seeing whether you like it or not. This is about, just like no experiment has just like one test case, and then you decide, yeah, you have a control, you have a, all this stuff going on, because you're in the aggregate trying to figure out principles that you can generalize. And I think that's even more pronounced when it's something as basic and primordial as the will, right? I mean, like, wow. The third, they continue, is that which you effect as an act of will. That choice that lies before you that is entirely subjective. No two people shall see catalysts in precisely the same way. Therefore, no two people as magical entities shall create the same change in consciousness. It is the right use of will that becomes the key to the working of the puzzle that lies before you when you face a choice in how to respond to a situation that you perceive. It is in the state of your mind as you approach the present moment that the use of the archetypes lies. And here they get into the archetypes. They continue, the archetypal mind, as has been iterated often during this gathering, is a resource of the deep mind. It is a plat, if you will, of energy paths that are possible within the system of illusions that constitutes space-time and time-space within third density upon your planet. It is a finite, delimited resource created for use by third density entities within incarnation upon planet Earth. I think we would be doing the listener a disservice if we did not tie the archetypal mind in. Because no matter what magical system you are talking about, heck, I'd even include, legal systems in this, Nithin. What we're talking about is the resonance in better or worse ways with this root archetypal mind, the sort of building blocks of consciousness, and therefore the system of all kinds of ways in which the energy of consciousness can be articulated and used. This is why I think it is so important to have your own expression within these rituals that are set down, or to find your own expression in a system that you devise that you then prosecute and practice over a long period of time. Because it is about resonating these root archetypes at deeper and more fundamental levels, because then in the process of doing this, you are coming into contact with deeper parts of yourself. We can talk about cosmic energies, but it's all the self. There are different ways in which we sort of, what's a good example? Like, have you ever you're playing with your brother or your sister, and you put your head upside down and you cover your mouth so that it looks like, or you cover a part of your face so it looks like you have a really distorted face because it's upside down. And it's like these different ways of like recasting and reconfiguring the very reality that we all perceive to find nuance, to find different ways of looking at it. And that was a silly example, but I think basically art and culture and social organizational patterns are all these different ways in which we play and find ways of doing it. And what lasts, what's timeless, are those things that resonate at these deeper levels than other things that are ephemeral.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's magic is all about uncovering this symbolism to speak to the deep unconscious, right? And it's like the symbolism, this language is how we understand it. It's like one of the things when you're in one of the magical practices is sigil making, which is where you're or making talismans, right? So it's using it look like squiggly lines, right? That don't really have any meaning to the conscious mind, but you infuse meaning into that when you consecrate it, and then therefore that sigil, when you observe it, right, it resonates with the unconscious part of you and helps to manifest that whatever energy you put into it. So
yeah, when we first started the working group, we put a lot of thought into the symbol that we chose. That's from the Fool archetype. And then I'll tell you that this idea that I've been sort of thinking about, the Council for Social Memory, a sort of more ecumenical law of one organization, it was large. Like I think this is a little bit superficial and kind of doesn't reflect completely well on me, but I remember putting a lot of thought and creativity into the logo that I designed, and that the logo felt like it was motivating me to do the organization rather than the other way around.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
On a negative side of that, there's this graphic novel that Douglas Rushkoff wrote called Alistair and Adolf, and it's this whole made up story, but perhaps based in some truth, about the magical warfare going on during World War II between Nazi Germany and England, with Aleister Crowley, of course, being like an English, like secret magical agent, right? Doing sigils and sex magic and stuff like this. And really, it's a really disturbing book, but it starts off it starts and ends in the modern day with the main character realizing that all of the corporate logos are sigils.
Yeah.
Right. And they're these like powerful tools designed to manipulate us and to sort of like channel energy in certain ways. But yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, a logo, right? Its logo is, is a sigil. Absolutely. It is. Yeah.
So one topic we've kind of been hitting upon, but not directly confronting, is this idea of magic and how it interacts with individuals, pairings, and groups. So a lot of the examples in the raw material, but not all, talk about like solitary uses of magic, right? We're basically changing the self. The example of working upon a location, that could be done in groups, but they don't talk too much about that. Certainly Tantra is, well, I'm not too familiar with Tantra, but I think typically it's pairs as opposed to solitary or more than two. I think Ra does talk about, stuff that involves group magic of, a group of positive individuals, if they put their will and focus together, can, I think, move a mountain. But I think that was more of an allegory than an actual example of something that's at least happened on planet Earth. So what's your understanding of group dynamics in the use of magic? Is it something that has a specific role? And is it something that's more basic or more advanced? Like, do you first work on individual magic and then maybe start experimenting with group? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I say, yeah, it's definitely more advanced. I don't have much experience working in groups personally in terms of magic. Admittedly, it's rare to find people who are actually into magic in the outside of the internet. It is something I am somewhat reluctant to do, just because people have different intentions and different understandings. And when you're doing this kind of work, you have to be on the same page, and be, at a similar, you don't have to be like for one person more powerful than the other, but you have to everyone involved has to be positive and has to have that positive intention or negative, right? If you have someone who is like, wishy-washy on that, it could just throw the whole thing off, and you could attract negative beings. Anyway, it could be very damaging. So it's important to find some, a group of people who are very aligned in that sense. So building that trust is very important, and it takes time. And so that's mainly why I personally haven't done group magic before. But that said, if you're fortunate enough to find people who could do that, it's incredibly powerful. It's more powerful than individual, absolutely. But it comes with more risk too, right? So you have to be very careful with the protection and what Carla and them were doing, with channeling Ra. I mean, that was deeply magical, right? And so it was dangerous, for them to do that, which is why they protected themselves and did all the rituals they did. But they still were attacked, and they still had difficulty, right? With Don, right? And the unfortunate incident that happened with him, but that was a direct result of attracting the fifth density, demonic, entities who were attracted to that magical working. And so it is very dangerous, but it's very rewarding too. But I personally don't have much experience in that, with groups. So I would say, obviously, if you're interested in magic, you should do it solitary to start, and then work up to that. Yeah.
I would agree. I would just say that, Jon, you do have experience in group magic work because you've participated in more than one channeling circle in the working group. And I think, and I'm glad that you brought up the magical nature of the raw contact, because I think that it's important to understand that channeling is kind of it's a magical act, but like I want to place the emphasis on, in my view, the information that comes through is kind of a byproduct of a magical act, right? It either is good or bad, but it is, what is magical is the way that the wills and the hearts come together to create a scenario, the very conduit through which something that is like radiantly and like just purely positive. That is the entire point. And that's what's so magical, is that we can all get together and do this. And we find ways to do it even when there's limitations on, being in the same place. It probably is less powerful for that way, but like we take measures to facilitate that. I also want to say that it's very, very clear in the raw contact that they were giving Don, Carla, and Jim an opportunity to engage in more ritual work, one that I don't think that they really took up. And I can totally understand, for the reasons we just said. They were already dealing with massive headaches in terms of group work. But I will say that it is something that the working group has always had as a possible project to do. And the longer that we have staying power, I mean, part of me didn't know that we'd be around 3 years later. But the more that we are able to use this group to build trust amongst each other and to really understand each other's hearts and what we want, so that we can rely on each other's energies, I think we make it possible for us in the future to do something. Now, there's totally legitimate reasons to not want to do magic. In fact, if you don't want to, if there's any part of you that doesn't want to do it, it's just like channeling. If there's any part of you that says no, you probably should listen to that. But for those of us who have been working for a long time and who want to deepen our seeking and serve for those purposes, I think it's worth looking into.
So no getting rich quick with magic, huh?
Oh, absolutely you can do that.
At least not if you're trying to polarize positively.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're doing tons of stuff like that on Wall Street, but that's the conspiracy thing coming out in me.
So any final concluding thoughts here? Any takeaways for us or the audience here?
I do want to say one thing. You mentioned earlier about prayer and about, is that a magical working or not? And I would say absolutely it is. And I say that, one of the things is that with prayer, right, it's you're attempting to speak directly to God, right? It's the one infinite creator. And that's the most powerful magic you can do. By far. The most results I've ever had were when I directly asked the one infinite creator for help. And it sometimes it immediately comes, like immediately, or sometimes, it takes a few days, whatever. But that's, the most effective outside of any rituals or doing anything like that. That's like number one is prayer, I would say.
Yeah, I think that is a great way to wrap up the topic, because what you're talking about is this inner connection to divinity is foundational. It is the place to start. Then, once you have sort of gotten to know yourself better, your flaws, your strengths, your foibles, and what it is that gets you up at the beginning of the day every day, and what you live for and what you would die for, and you start to know that a little bit more, then you have something that you have substance that you can put into a container like a ritual. And the ritual can give that substance definition. It can focus it and it can point it in a direction. When we achieve social memory and fourth density on this planet, we probably will still work with ritual, but it'd be a lot clearer what we're all doing. And it'll be a lot clearer what the promise is, and how coming together and sacrificing a little bit of our personal will so that we as a planet can reach out to other planets and help them in a laser beam of 8 billion individuals all focusing on one idea of service to the creator. That kind of power will be available to us. And I think it will be also very relatively easy to do compared to the amount of unity we have in our political and social systems now. Now we can start to work in these, we can build with the Duplo blocks, right? But it's a place to start, just like we all started building with wooden blocks and Duplo and Tinker Toys and stuff like that. And we're learning in these small ways, but we're learning. But it starts first with being able to be able to pick up that Tinker Toy in the first place. And that's that connection to the light within. Once you have that, it's like Munka said in that January 15th session. Now you have the basis for networking that light. And that's what, when you start to get into ritual magic, and especially group magic, that's what you're doing. But the starting point is very basic, and it's very intimate and personal. And what's the best way to get there? What's the Confederation's refrain for seemingly every question? It's the M word: meditation.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Jon, for a very enlightening discussion. As I said, I wasn't too familiar with magic, but this really kind of helped me understand it at a deeper level. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Jon, we don't usually have guests lately, so it's been really good to have a third pole to bounce things off of. And I really appreciate your personal touch on this. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any plugs or anything other than your YouTube that you'd like to tell people about?
No, you just check out my YouTube channel, Inspire369. Also on Twitter. Don't post as much on Twitter, but try to post a video once every few months. So
fantastic. All right. Well, and thanks, Nithin, too, for joining us. The structure that you gave this was a great relief, because otherwise, Jon, you and I have one-on-ones every once in a while, and we can kind of go off into outer space and have a hard time finding our way back. So thank you, Nithin, for grounding this.
My pleasure.
Okay. Well, thank you, listeners, for checking out Inaudible for a 46th episode. Man, I cannot believe that we've done 46 of these. That's insane. But really hope that you will let us know if we're hitting the mark for you, if you have any ideas on things to talk about. Haven't forgot about the sinkhole of indifference idea for an episode. So that's still in the hopper. But thank you so much for all of your support. Have a great 2 weeks. We're trying to adhere to a 2-week schedule, and so far we have a backlog of episodes. We're trying to get to where we have a backlog of episodes to release, so that we can keep a nice cadence and keep in contact with y'all regularly. So thanks for your support, and in the meantime, stay in the love and light.